as has been pointed out, one of the things that's made the major difference is there never used to be chapters. There never used to be verses. There never used to be gaps. That just rolls continuously, and it just continues through. There are no gaps, there are no stops, there are no...
So Jeffrey, what you say, that is proof that the Word of God was written in Hebrew.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Remember that when he scattered all the languages from Babylon, there had to have been a language that they all spoke at that time. And he didn't say he did away with it, he just said he confused the languages. He didn't confuse this one. He's confused a lot since. One of the hallmarks of a lot of languages is confusion when you start trying to translate from one to the other. No, she's not watching. Just letting you know I'm putting it on. Not only am I going to put it on, but I'm actually going to press the record button. Okay, so how many morehs have we got? I'm not talking about chocolate bar. So morehs, teachers. So what's the job of a teacher? What's the bottom line for a teacher? A teacher is to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if they miss something out, guess what that is? Lies. Even if the other 99.9% of it was truth. If you don't complete it, it's not truth. It's a lie. A lie can be something that you miss out, not just something that you add. So we've read Yahweh's. These are Yahweh's designated times. I don't understand what part of that people don't understand. They're his, and he designated them. And he designated them before there was an Israel, before there were Jews, before there were Gentiles. It's his message to mankind, his creation. When he created, he didn't turn around and say, well, this bunch here I'm going to keep as one side, and I'm going to call them the Jews, and then I'm going to keep this one to the side, and I'm going to call them the Americans, and I'm going to keep this one and call them the... They're all his creation. They all belong to him. So for me, his designated times and guidelines are self-explanatory. Holy convocations, permanent regulations designated by him. We're to observe them, proclaim them, and teach them to our children. If we're not keeping them, then we can't teach them to our children. The best way to teach them to our children is to observe them. And as we've done lots of times, and as Robin did with Pamela at Pesach on the Seder, she adopted Pamela as her daughter. Because when a Rev Shabbat happens, or a Holy Convocation happens, the mother will always have one of the children doing it alongside her, learning how to do it in the next generation. So all of the girls will learn that. Everything the mother does, the girls will learn. Everything that the father does, the boys will learn. They're included in it. They're not just told about it. Men in particular are not built to sit in chairs and listen. Men are created to do something. And there's nothing more frustrated than a man who's sitting in a meeting, listening and not being able to do something about it. So that's why I try to encourage. Don't just listen to what I'm saying. This is what we're doing now. We're starting to investigate. What do you need to do something about it?
Can I give an example of this?
Yes.
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 My husband, he's not a particularly good dancer, but he told me afterwards he would sooner be up dancing than sitting.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Give a man a plan and he'll carry it out. So, ladies, all you have to do is give him the plan and he'll be happy. Give him something to get his teeth into and get it done.
And then you can tell him, but dear, you gave me the plan, I'm just giving it back to you.
Yes.
Carrie's little twin boys fight over who's going to say the bracha over the bread and the wine.
Yes.
And little Mimi, who's 4,
Yes.
the writing of the candle
Yes.
with the Hebrew prayer.
which is why they become adults at the age of 13. They assume adult responsibilities. Why? Because they've learned the responsibilities as they've grown up. I hear so many people turn around and say, oh, I can't cook, my mother wouldn't let me in the kitchen. Even guys that turn and say, oh, I'd love to have learned to do something, but my mother, no, she wouldn't let me near the kitchen. And you tend to find a lot of people that do things well don't let people join in with them. Oh, it's quicker to do it myself. Yes, it's quicker to do it yourself, but you don't teach anybody. It's more important to teach somebody than have it go fast because it's quicker. I'm sure Yahweh's up there saying, no, I'm far too busy. It would be much easier if I just got this and did it on my own. It would be much easier for him to just do it on his own. He doesn't need us to join in. But he wants us to join in. He wants us to learn. He wants us to participate in what he does.
He made us because he was lonely. Yeah.
That's why man got woman, because he was lonely. The animals just didn't cut it. Well, I hear a lot of people now saying that they'd rather have a dog or a cat than a person. It just shows they don't understand relationship. Usually means that there's a hurt in their life. So beware of what you say sometimes, because it gives out clues as to where you're at.
Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yes.
So you know what's in someone's heart by the words that they say.
Yeah. So what are our children being taught to observe today? By us and by other people. They've been taught an awful lot, because this is the most media-savvy generation ever. And they're onto so many different social media sites and so many magazines and so many TVs and so many everything else like that, that they even speak with an American accent. Simply because most of the information you're getting, it's not a derogatory thing, but most of the information they're getting is from American films and American programs. I can't imagine a lot of people, parents in America, being happy if all the kids watched was Australian soaps and Australian programs and had an Australian accent. I'm sure they'd get very upset. We want our children to be our children, not trying to be something else. So what are they being taught to observe today? And who designated what they've been taught to observe today? Well, I can tell you about Christmas and Easter. They were designated by a Roman emperor called Constantine.
And
same with Shabbat, same with Sunday. They're following something that was designated by a Roman emperor to celebrate his status as the sun god. The day of the venerable sun. That's what Sunday is all about. So who designated them and who do they honour? What we teach our future leaders becomes part of their lives. They're not just children, they're our future leaders. I'm sure, I still remember my father getting very upset sometimes, realising that my generation were going to become the future leaders. It didn't make him feel good. As we wore all our long hair and our Afghan jackets and our flower ties, and I'm sure he thought we were going to make a mess of it someday.
Did you do a bowl?
Isn't it amazing how they change?
He was always the height of fashion.
What?
Very, very smart. Yep. 60s, don't forget we're part of the 60s era, aren't we, darling? Just before the flower children.
Regency jackets.
Yes, very, very smart.
Always got pick of shoes.
Yep, yep. Rachel's haircut.
We weren't quite as radical as Abba, but close. And what's his name? I can picture him. I can picture what he did with the disco dancing and stuff. I can't remember his name.
John Travolta.
John Travolta, yeah. So what we teach our future leaders, our children, becomes part of their lives. And that life follows a designated path to follow on a daily basis. And there are only two options. Either 100% truth or 100% lies. There's nothing in between. One brings the blessing of life and sets them free. The other puts them under a curse of sin and death. It's that simple. If it's not the truth, it puts them under a curse. It's a lie. And there's only one person who's the father of lies. And the interesting thing is people have all sorts of names for him, but in there it calls him the adversary, because that's what he is. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers, and adversaries, adversary, whatever. Yes, we are fully responsible for what we teach, not just with our mouths, but through our actions. One of my father's favourite things used to be, don't do as I say, do as I say, not as I do. What a terrible thing to teach a child. But that was that generation's thing.
Yeshua said that.
Yeah.
Do as the ones that sit in Moses' seat will
Yes.
tell you, but
Yes.
don't do as they do.
Don't do as they do. No. The opposite.
No, he said, Moses says.
Yeah,
Moses says, don't do as they do.
yeah, that's
There's
what
been
I
a lot
said.
of misunderstanding about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Daniel basically said.
So, we're responsible for what we teach, and we can either lead them towards Yahweh, or we're going to lead them astray. If we don't lead them to Yahweh, then we're leading them astray. And somebody said it this morning.
Gathering and scattering.
Yeah. If we don't gather them, the opposite of that is scattering.
And if we're not for him, then we're against
Yeah.
him.
Yes.
Children today are taught that accumulating and hoarding possessions will give them security and make them happy. That's called the advertising industry, otherwise known as the coveting industry.
Yeah.
But telling them that accumulating and hoarding possessions that will give them security and make them happy is like telling them that they can permanently satisfy their hunger by taping sandwiches all over their bodies. It makes just as much sense. Is it going to make them any less hungry? Well, hoarding and gathering toys isn't going to make any more happy. In fact, some of the most miserable people I know have got billions. They're told to question everything and then make up their own answers. Or in other words, they become victims of delusional stinking thinking. And they're told that there are no absolutes. I've got news for you. There's lots of absolutes.
Yeah.
Try jumping off a cliff and saying, there are no absolutes, there's no gravity.
Yeah.
I think by the time they reach the bottom, they may recant.
Between the line there or
Yeah. So if there are no absolutes, there are no solid boundaries to keep them safe and secure. No guidelines to live by. And that makes them incredibly insecure and fearful. A child wants to try the doors. They want to test the boundaries. And what they actually want is for them to be locked. Because if they're not, they feel insecure. They'll test you. They'll push the boundaries. And you'll say no, and they'll sneak round the back and try it. But in reality, they don't want it to be open to them. They want to see if what you said is true. And then they feel secure.
You know, the Duma that was teaching Susan and all the other couples who were getting their first babies, she said, oh, you must just let the baby, he's the ruler of the house. And so Susan listened to me, but our Israeli friend, she came and saw us, and she said, no, the child knows nothing. You must guide it to certain times, otherwise you'll have no peace.
Yeah.
And you guide it to sleep times and feed times. You guide it.
If the child becomes the ruler of the house, then you create two fearful, insecure people, the child and you.
Yes. But my Susan's been programmed not to listen to her mother, but then she believed so and so, and that's what I was saying. I was.
If there are no guidelines to live by, then they are incredibly insecure and fearful. And so, like Pilate, they say, well, what's truth?
Yeah.
How many children are here today and saying, oh, but that's your truth, that's not my truth. Truth is truth.
Interpretation. Yeah.
Pilate asked, you sure if you remember, what's truth?
Yeah.
Actually, they're asking the wrong question. It's not what is truth, it's who is truth. Truth isn't an it. Truth is a person. Truth is Yahweh. He is the truth, and he has a spirit of truth, the way, the truth, and the life. He actually created and controls all three of those things. Yahweh is the way, the truth, and the life. He's the starting point. He's the map, and he's the destination. It is who he is, not just something he does. He doesn't do truth. He is the truth. It's who he is. It's part of his makeup. And the Ruach HaKodesh, his spirit, is described as the spirit of truth and will lead us all into truth. Of course the spirit will lead us into truth because the spirit is part of truth. And it will lead us back to him every single time. It will lead us back to him. That's the job of the spirit of truth, is to lead us back to the source of all truth. And once you do that, you can relax. I remember I used to be so insecure and so worried about being led astray because there were so many people out there saying so many things. Once you relax and realise that the promise is that as long as you listen to the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit of Truth, he will lead you into all truth. You don't have to worry about being led astray. The only time you need to be worried about being led astray is if you ignore him. You don't have that daily relationship.
But you imagine the looks on people's face when you're surrounded by people who understand their truth and you show them where the flaws are and they give you a very evil look, you know, and it's like, and they want you to believe what they believe.
Because the very simple answer is, I'm sorry, that's not truth.
Yeah.
That's just your theory. It's not truth.
And then those spirits that are with him just manifest.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Those demons, they hate being exposed.
That immediately tells you where this person's at.
Mm.
You know them by their fruit. A bad tree can't produce good fruit no matter how much they try to.
But you can say to those people, you're actually quoting scripture, because the Lord actually says, I think it's the beginning of Samuel or Joshua, he says, they had no God, so everyone did as he thought best, each to his own. And that's dreadful.
So on the other hand, Hasatan, who's described as the father of lies or the adversary, it's who he is, not just what he does. It defines him. He is the father of all lies. It's who he is. He can't do anything else.
He can't speak the truth even
He can't
if he
speak the
wanted
truth.
to.
So if you say, oh, he's accusing me of this, that and the other, ignore it. Because he's not telling the truth. He can't. He can't accuse you of something
That's true.
that's the truth because he can't speak the truth.
Yeah.
So if he's accusing you of something, guess what? The opposite's the truth.
But he does also come as an angel of light.
Oh, he will.
He
You'll
masks
say,
and disguises
you're
himself.
you're a lousy son. So immediately what you know is that you're a good son. Take it as a positive, not a negative. Because he can't tell the truth.
Yeah.
But
All he can tell is lies.
But it amazes me how when he was being tested by him, well, Yeshua was being tested by him, he actually used the Torah to
he can
shut
use
him
the
up.
Torah, but
Yeah.
he can't come up with the truth.
Yeah.
But he can copy
Yeah.
what he's seen and what he's heard.
Yeah.
Plagiarized.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I mean was Yeshua actually used the Torah against the adversary.
Exactly. Because he did the same thing as him.
Yeah.
He couldn't come up with it himself, so he had to use something that was already there. So he said, fine, I'll answer you with what you've tried to come up with. And you can't counter it because it's not original. It's just something that you've heard. You don't know it.
He used a butler, a little lamp, a butler. Sword.
So he's the father of lies.
One of his biggest strategies, so definite, is that you'll present something that is right. It needs to be the truth.
Yes.
Like sugar,
Yes.
with cyanide
Yeah.
in the middle.
Yeah.
But with just
One little tiny thing.
That's
People will swallow it because it's a spoonful of sugar.
That's the bit you've got to be watching out for, eh?
So who are the primary teachers? You're all sitting here right now, if you're a parent. Parents have always meant to be the primary teachers. Who teaches children the most in the early days? Usually the mother.
I mean, the Shema talks about it. it talks about that you teach it to your children. Yeah.
Because he's talking about doing and not just going along and getting your head crammed full of knowledge.
He's also talking to the men to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So parents as the primary teachers motivate far more by what they do than what they say. That's scary, eh?
Look at our children. If they've got a bad parent, grow up and copy. They're almost identical.
Yeah. Whether you like it or not, whatever you do is teaching your children.
Like kind begets like kind.
Very safe.
I once heard somebody that runs a fairly big addiction service, and what they've said is where the parents leave off, the children begin. So somebody just has a few drinks in the house, the children drink to excess. If you've got nothing in the house, then they'll usually start by just having a few drinks and things. But where the parents leave off and say this is acceptable, they start there and move on.
Not all of them do that. My parents drank to excess, but I...
And you can, you can react against it and everything else. But they're saying the ones that do move on, their starting point is where the parents have left off.
I think it's more like the rebellious nature of the child. My father was a biker. He belonged to a boy racer thing, and he used to, when he was younger, used to race his friends up and down Cameron Road when he was younger, and he loved cars. I, on the other hand, do not like cars.
Yeah, it can attract or repel both.
I'd like to say something, and I've said too much, but I want to say. People who know Hebrew laugh at the translation of Beelzebub. And I understand it's Baal Zuf, which is Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
And a fly has, I think, a 40-day period. So there's hope for people who are in bad habits. If they do the right thing for 40 days, they
Is it
get
19
out.
or 21 to replace a habit? 21.
Is it 20?
In 21 days, if you stick with something, you can
was
replace
40.
a bad habit with a good habit. But you can't just, the main failing that people have is they try and take something away without replacing it with something else. You have to replace it with something good. But if you do that for 21 days, at the end of that time, it will cease to be a problem anymore. The new habit will just seem normal to you, and you won't even bother thinking about the old one. But it takes that amount of time. Interesting, 3 Shabbats. It takes 3 Shabbats to break a habit and start a new one.
Good one.
It's in the scriptures. Because that's really
I'll leave that for the teachers to look at.
The name of the woman that discovered that, her name is Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she's a Christian too.
Yeah.
A neural brain surgeon, I think.
Okay.
Scientist.
But the interesting thing is, the things that work always come out of here.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it works, it came out of here. The principle.
Same as if you have trouble fasting, you get more fast the night before.
That's right. So subsequently, children are always focused completely on the saying, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Children don't care how much you know. What they want to know is how much you care. When they find out how much you care, they'll come to you for answers. And that's another thing. Don't try and give them answers because they'll reject them. It's wired in, particularly with teenagers. If you want them to actually listen to something and take notice of it, let them come to you. If they come to you and ask you a question, they'll tend to take the answer. If you go and try and dominate, say, they'll just, don't want to know that. All you ever do is lecture me.
Or what about going to them and just caring for them? And then in time, you might be able to lead and guide them into.
Yeshua always has and always will teach and lead by example. One of the main things that we read about during the Seder is how he wrapped a towel around his waist and washed their feet, because he always taught them by example. See, unruly children. And he taught them to lead by example, for saying, teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. And he didn't actually just say, teach them everything I've commanded you. What he was basically saying was, everything that I've poured into you and taught by example, go and do the same. He never opened a Bible college. He lived, ate, slept, and shared completely with his Talmudim. He led the way. And they followed. And that was the whole point. He gave them the freedom to follow or not follow. And at one stage, they turned around and said something about going. Oh no, sorry, he turned around and said, are you going to leave me too? And their answer was, where else would I go? I may not be happy with what you've said and what you've done, but I'm staying with you.
Amen.
It's about relationship. You can go other places, but all you'll finish doing is coming back around in a full circle to him.
And why did he the demon possessed man that was living in the tombs and stuff, when he healed him and Jesus cast the demons out of him, he was in his right mind, and he was sitting with Jesus, and he wanted to stay with Jesus, and he wanted to go with him, but Jesus didn't let him.
No.
He told him, go back to your family.
Yes.
Why do you think he said that?
Because he would want to do it for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't where he wanted him to be. He wasn't in the position to come and go through all the stuff that the rest of the guys were going through. He needed to go back and be a witness to his family. And he needed to learn how to become a father again. He wasn't qualified to be in the place where Yeshua's Talmud were at that time.
Yeah.
He had a different
calling.
Different calling on his life. And his calling was to just be himself, to be a good father, and to show other people the difference between what he was like and what he was like now. And he was still working with him, even though they may not have physically been walking on the same road together. But he was still had become part of his team, but just in a different way.
Jeffrey, the spell comes to isolation as well, because if you go into like a cave or something, you'll be okay for a moment, but when you continue being in that cave, you become isolated, become absorbed.
Absolutely.
And that's why, and you have all kinds of things happen to you, and that's what Jesus saw that he needed.
Yes,
to be contact
he needed to be with family.
He needed to be in contact with people so that he could interact.
It was part of his acceptance and part of becoming somebody again, instead of just this the crazy person that nobody would go anywhere near.
And also, God never told Yeshua to choose it.
Yes.
Right.
So he led the way, and they followed, and then they in turn repeated the process with others, who again led others. Because it's as much about the journey as the destination. Yeshua, like all good moreh, or teachers, taught in the simplest of ways. And the reason he did that is because he fully understood the subject. If I can't explain it simply, it means I don't fully understand the subject. A good teacher will take the complicated and make it simple.
That's interesting because academics always want to make things difficult.
Yeah, so that you have to keep coming to them for answers.
Albert
Christians
Einstein.
do the same thing. They want you to keep coming to them for answers. They use different languages. They all talk Latin because you have to keep coming back to them. It's a controlling technique.
Yeah.
I could speak to you in all sorts of scientific languages and all sorts of religious languages and all sorts of complicated things. And then every week you have to keep coming to me for the answers. That's control, and we're not into control.
I used to sometimes find it frustrating, so I'd just go off and do the job. I could get it done in half the time, and they were still standing there talking.
Yeah.
Well, it was Albert Einstein that thought that it is best to explain the most complicated theories in most simpler form.
Yeah, because he understood what a real teacher does.
Yeah.
That's the job of the teacher.
Also with Yeshua, in this time he talked, even though the situation was happening with the people, and that he spoke to his spirit.
Yeah, he did, absolutely,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
the
yeah.
mind.
Not the mind, yeah.
No.
And
And that was the problem with the Pharisees, because they only ever listened to the mind.
the potential of
And they'd say, but that doesn't make sense. And he turns and says, it's not meant to. It's meant to make spirit. It's not a cognitive ability. It's a spiritual ability. So he fully understood the subject he was talking about. Hence, when all these expert Torah teachers, the scientists of their day, the big thinkers of their day came to him, he would usually just ask them a question. And they'd just walk away because they knew they were wasting the time with this guy. He knew what they were saying. He understood them. And he understood the answers to the questions that they weren't even asking.
And one of them said, if we say yes, people will stone us. So they said,
And if we say no, we're in trouble as well.
yes.
So they'd sort of say, I'm not going to tangle with this guy again. He fully understood the subject. People who complicate things are usually hiding the fact that they don't understand. And they're trying to keep a barrier of control as the experts. And they keep that barrier there. They're the experts. You know, they're special people. You don't need intellect to understand this. You don't need intellect to have a relationship with the other one. It's not about IQ, it's about spiritual quotient, not intelligent quotient. All that does is tell you your ability to memorize stuff.
There's a scripture when he come forward that he didn't come for the position to do with the doctor.
No.
He said he come for the ones that are sick.
Exactly. And that's the biggest thing that people miss out. As Christina's learned, hospitals are run for the benefit of the doctors and nurses.
Absolutely.
Not the patients. The patients are a nuisance. They just mess up the beds, dirty the floor, take up your time. And that's how most religious institutions treat you. They're there, you know, the whole thing's been set up for their benefit. You're just allowed to come in once a week.
Derek used to say he would enjoy his work if it weren't for his class.
Yeshua used basic word pictures all the way through this. You call them parables, you call them what you like, but they're just basic word pictures. And people will learn more from a particular phrase or a word picture than they ever will from a lecture. How many lectures have you sat through? How many conventions have you been to where you've been somewhere for 3 and 4 days? How many of you can stand up and tell me anything you remember about them? Not many, not much. He used word pictures, everyday illustrations of situations faced by his hearers, based on the Hebrew culture of the time. And that's why I say it's not about being Jewish or not Jewish, but unless you understand what he was saying, where he was saying it, and who he was saying it to, you'll never understand what he meant. You just won't understand it.
No.
That's why we use so many Hebrew illustrations and things, because that's how it was written. And it's been translated wrong. A lot of it's been translated in the wrong way, because it's a concept, and they try and translate it into one word. If you'd never driven before, and you had 18 driving lessons, and you went through all the hassle, and you had to buy the car, and you had to do lots of different things, and then you finally passed your test, and they translated to that to, he drives, wouldn't tell you much of a story, would it? Because they've taken a concept and just changed it into one word, he drives. That doesn't explain anything. And it's the same with most of the Hebrew in there. You can't translate it that way. Shalom is not just peace. Peace is only one aspect of the whole concept of shalom, of well-being.
We said Shabbat is a benefit, and if you ticked off all the benefits in the Bible, you'd see we've been robbed blind.
Yes. I mean, if you try and translate Shabbat as day off, it's ridiculous. Shabbat is a whole concept.
Yeah.
You can't just translate it
With
that
a whole
way.
lot of consequences.
Yeah. Therefore, to fully understand most of his teaching requires a comprehensive understanding of the culture that he was living in and teaching. If I talked about installing pink bats from farmers in the loft to a non-Kiwi culture, they might think I was describing some exotic creatures hanging in a barn obtained from a nearby agricultural property. instead of thick insulation in the roof of my house obtained at a well-known local department store.
Jeffrey of that, is the daughter.
I mean, you get somebody from South Africa,
Pink daughters.
and Sarah said, I've got pink bats in my roof, and they go, oh, really? And all this haters, they've got insulation they got from farmers.
This was one of the first things we ever heard in New Zealand. The first weekend we arrived. And someone was saying, oh, they were going to farmers, and the other one said, oh, what are you getting? She said, oh, I'm going to buy all my pink bats. You know?
And she said, oh yeah, and she said, no, I'm going to install them in my roof. And we thought, you what?
Going to farmers to get pink bats. We just thought it was very peculiar.
I'd like to use it because it's a very good illustration. I mean, if you talk to Henry and some of the others of you that come from South Africa, I'm sure some of the things you heard baffle you. Because they just don't make any sense unless you understand the culture and what's being said and who it's being said to.
Well, they talk about supper and tea and dinner and lunch. And you don't know what you're going to have.
And we would have the same problem going to Poland. They'd all say something and they'd all laugh and we'd think, well, what was funny?
I came to New Zealand and we didn't speak English. And somebody invited us for a tea.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's strange, 7 o'clock in the evening and they want to invite us for tea. We had tea at home and then we came and it was like dinner.
Yep.
Funny stories.
When our kids came home from school the first time, they said, we've got to take a plate.
Take a plate.
We
Yeah.
don't want.
We didn't know. The kids just said, we're going to
We've just been told to bring a plate, so we gave them.
We had no idea what they were going to do.
Nobody said we had to put food on it.
We had the same problem.
Yes. Yeah, you did too.
So I'm sure there's many, many things like that. You have to understand the context to understand. You have to talk to another Kiwi to understand what they're saying. But it doesn't mean everybody has to become a Kiwi.
No.
It just means that you need to understand what's being said.
In fact, he commands us, when you come to know him, you remain as you are. You don't convert.
I know this will come as a shock to you, but many people resist new teaching.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yes.
Talk about mainstream church.
People hate new teaching. Some people hate new teaching. And a lot depends on where you're coming from.
And then they say, oh, that's just your own opinion. Oh, that's just your own view.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own opinions.
Yeah. And that's saying I absolutely have, well, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I don't want either. I don't want anything to do with either of them.
That's why you should always quote a scripture and say, as it is written.
Yes.
You cannot argue with
No, you can't, as it is written. That's right. And the people will say, but I've been taught by experts. I've been doing it this way for years. We always have done it this way syndrome. We have always done it this way syndrome. And I've talked about it before, about the woman that chopped off the leg of a piece of lamb to put it in the oven. And she wanted to know why, so she talked to her mother, and her mother said, I don't know, talk to your grandmother. And she talked to her grandmother, and her grandmother said, because we had a thin stove. But it was a family tradition. They didn't know why they did it, they just did it. But what becomes even worse is they become unteachable. When somebody becomes unteachable, they have a huge problem. I've listened to some of the world's greatest scientists, and what they basically say is, we're finally at the stage where we understand how much we don't know. You can never know it all. You can never even understand a fraction of what there is to know. You can never become unteachable, because the minute you become unteachable, you start to petrify. You start to lose what life's all about. Life's a journey. And people that say that it's always the way we've done it this way, and they become unteachable because they know it all, are usually the people that don't put it into action in their lives. Yes, they know it all, but they don't live it. There are so many people that turn and say, well, I don't need to come anymore. You've taught me everything that you can teach me. Of course I have. The whole point about it, coming here, is not about the teaching, it's about the relationship. It's about being family. It's about learning from each other. And it's not an academic exercise. Like I say, you don't need to be an Einstein to have a relationship with yoga. I've seen people in wheelchairs with what's the thing where they shake all the time? Yeah. And they've had more of a lap of yoga than me. Just, it radiates from them. It radiates from all the stickers they've got all over their wheelchair. It radiates from the fact that they're praying day and night. They know that they have some problems, but they also know that they love God. They may not be able to quote you every verse and chapter in here, but it's not about that. It's about their relationship and how they treat other people. It's about the fact that they go around in their wheelchairs handing out tracts to people because they can do that. They focus on what they can do and not what they can't do. I've had people sitting in meetings. People basically said they're in a vegetative state. The minute you start singing, the minute you start teaching, their eyes light up. You know that there's something happening in there. You may not see an outward appearance of it, but you know that their spirit's coming alive. And you can see them almost start to shake and quiver because there's an excitement building up within them. And people, they only see the physical outward appearance. They don't understand what's happening on the inside. So don't count somebody off just because they're not physically pounding the streets and telling people to repent.
I've got a question here that I could clarity with concerning my eldest grandson Jordan. We were in SIFs yesterday. He was talking with the chap that was there. And for the first time I've seen relief in that child's face because the counsellor explained to him that all the force and nastiness he's getting from his father, he doesn't have to take on as his own. He doesn't have to behave like that.
Free will.
Yeah, he said, you can change. You can just say, well, I don't want to go down that way. I want to do it this way.
Yeah.
The relief in that young boy was instant. It was amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
He's still furious, but... That's wonderful. Yeah.
As you already know, the definition of insanity, which is followed by the majority these days as tradition, is the act of doing the same wrong things the same way over and over again, but expecting a different result.
We must not tell some people who
But this is what people do. They turn and say, but I keep on doing it and I don't get success. Of course you don't, because you're not doing it the right way. If you're not getting a success, you need to change the way you do it. You need to pray and ask for the right way. Don't expect different results if you keep doing things the same way. There's an interesting saying out there. It's like, people say all these things, and then it's, well, how's it working for you? To me, that sums it up. You can tell me all you like. How's that actually working for you? And they say, but it isn't. You tell me so.
So if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always done.
Yes.
It's just mindless, traditional, unsuccessful repetition. Repetition doesn't make anything right. Repetition, when something's the truth, instills it within you. The repetition of something that's wrong does the same thing. Repetition isn't the answer.
We've been trying to reach a man and his wife for ages, and they are so full of tradition that they've come to the weddings, our children have told, and they're asking questions. They haven't got there yet.
No.
But as Yeshua said, your tradition nullifies me. They just, oh, it's hard.
People assume that therefore tradition is bad. Tradition's not bad. It's just that some traditions are good and some traditions are bad. There are good traditions as well.
Yeah.
Family, getting together, that's a good tradition. Things that you've done with your kids. They love that. They love doing the same things year after year after year after year because it becomes something that gives them security. There are good traditions. Just don't follow the bad ones that don't work. If you keep going along to a festival every year, And the result is that everybody starts shouting at each other and fighting with each other and getting drunk. It's not a good festival. That's why the shelters are full of people at that time in December. Far too much teaching is information-based. And it's delivered using the failed theory of treating the mind like a bucket and cramming it to capacity. With information overloads of propaganda, myths, legends, garbage and theories and current philosophies, instead of placing a banquet before them and showing them one bite at a time what's safe to eat. A real teacher doesn't just stand there and discharge information. A real teacher prepares a banquet and then shows you how to eat it one bite at a time. He shows you what is clean and wholesome and what is just junk food. Why would you hand somebody random bunches of flowers that wilt and die quickly? A real moreh, a real teacher, instead will actually get down in the dirt with them and teach them how to plant the seeds, cultivate their own plants, and that once they grow, they'll multiply endlessly. A real moreh is an explorer who leads other explorers to discover hidden treasure and new frontiers. And they do it by making it fun and exciting. What are the best times you've ever had teaching your kids? When something's fun.
Yeah.
And they relax so much they don't even realise you're teaching them. You need to make it fun and exciting. And you need to encourage enthusiastically. If you're not enthusiastic about a subject, why should they be? They know the things that light your fuse. Because they see the difference in the enthusiasm that you have when it's something that really excites you. And when it excites you, it excites them. They may not always pick it up because they have different personalities and different things that they want to do, but they pick up the enthusiasm, they pick up the excitement. We are instructors or player coaches. We're part of a leadership team with a responsibility to lead, guide, encourage, and show you where the food is. That's our job, is to show you where the bakery is, and then go with you to the bakery and introduce you to the baker. Not to turn around and say, if you want bread, you have to come to me. I've cornered the market. And then hide where it actually comes from. That's control. I still remember Ian Grant in a meeting in Auckland one time. First of all, he called himself the best dressed drain pipe in town. He said, I'm just a drain pipe. He pours it in and I pour it out. But that was his illustration. And he said, my only job here today is to show you where the bakery is, where to get your bread. Simple things like that have more impact and more people remember it than sitting there lecturing them about theology. And they shouldn't be lecturing theology anyway, they should be lecturing neology. The Catholics will understand that one. Or the ex-Catholics. I still remember the first time I ever went when Pamela was officially a Catholic. And all I ever did was get up and down and up and down and up and down and never stopped. As they guessed the place. I'm sure it's to keep people
sedated.
Bells, smells and nonsense.
One of the priests said, you better get used to it because it's going to be like this in heaven.
I'm not going. There is one. Take off your list. So when you show them where the food is, you provide an environment for them to learn, to grow and mature, a secure environment. Your job is to provide a secure environment for them to learn, not cram it into them. It would look a bit odd for a 13-year-old if you sat there saying, now here comes the choo-choo, open your mouth. It's not meant to be a permanent thing. And yet I see people every Sunday, and up the front he said, open your mouths, here's the choo-choo. What temperature would you like your bottle? The mediocre teacher tells. The good teacher explains. The superior teacher demonstrates. And the great teacher inspires. It doesn't sound much, but those really do put it into perspective. A mediocre teacher tells. Nothing wrong with that. He's teaching. A good teacher explains what he's talking about. But a superior teacher demonstrates. He gets down there and demonstrates. But the great teacher inspires, and I suggest that the greatest of all teachers demonstrates and inspires through the demonstration. Remember, spoon feeding teaches us nothing except the shape of the spoon. Think about it. Experience is okay, but it's a hard teacher because it gives the test first and then the lesson. Isn't it? Yeah. Everybody says, oh, you need to learn by experience. Yeah, that's great. But it gives the test first and then the lesson afterwards. You actually needed the lesson first. You'll often hear people say condescendingly, those who can do, those who can't teach. Well, they're both wrong. They're all wrong. The best teachers do both. It's not about one or the other, it's about both doing both of them in balance. Doing it and teaching it as they do it. We spend the first 2 years of a child's life teaching them to walk and talk, and then we spend the next 16 years confusing them by telling them to sit down and shut up. We give kids mixed messages. You don't stop doing that, and come in the back and sort you out, and they're all thinking, oh yeah, you're doing educate.
Once again, I run an example of this young lad the other day. The first time in his life that he's had an adult say to him, what would you like us to do? What do you think? He was stumped. Yeah. He didn't know what to say.
No. But you see, you've got a whole generation that was brought up on the Victorian. There's so many Victorian sayings, and they were hard and harsh. And people will quote them to you as Bible verses, and they're not. They're just Victorian quotes.
Yeah. Like what?
One of the favourite things is
children are to be seen and not heard. So generations of kids have been taught to just keep quiet and stay in the background.
I grew up with that, and I never even spoke to my children. They used to say to me, Mum, you don't sit down and talk.
Yes.
And then they always said to me, speak up, because they couldn't hear. But we taught not to speak up.
Yeah.
But it's about sharing with them, it's about including them as part of the family. But it's about being a parent. Too many people today want to be their friend. They've got friends, they don't need friends. What they want is a parent.
Yes.
That's what they need as a parent. Because a parent is not just a friend, it's a teacher. It's somebody who guides, it's somebody that sets guidelines, somebody that sets barriers, that stops them falling off the cliff. How many times have you seen parents and their kids will take one look at them and run for the road, knowing this car's coming? What they're really saying is, what are you going to do about it? You see the look on their face. It's like, I'm doing something, I know it's wrong, what are you going to do about it? What they actually want is the parent to run after them and pick them up and stop them from hitting the car, or stop the cars from hitting them. It's just, this is the way things are. So a teacher coach helps turn groups of individuals into fully functioning, successful, game-winning teams. And any of you who've played any kind of sports or been in the forces and stuff like that will understand that. You get the right leader and they can win any game on any day. It's not just about the players. You need to understand that a teacher coach is not the owner of a team. I know it doesn't make sense here in New Zealand, but in places like America where people actually own the sports teams, a lot of people who have religious institutions think that they own the building and own the people. They're not owners, they're coaches. And their job is to turn a group of different individuals with different skills and different temperaments into fully functioning, successful game-winning teams. Yahweh is there to lead. Yahweh's task is to lead you into victory. And also to encourage you in defeat. It's as important for a coach or a teacher to be with them in defeat as it is in success. So many times I see these kids and their faces fall because the coaches turn and say, what a bunch of total off. And they think that's not a way to motivate them. All that does is make them feel bad about themselves. You actually you discourage them. You take their courage away instead of encouraging them and giving them courage. I mean, I see parents doing it. Oh, you're an idiot. No, he's not. He just made a mistake. Your job is to get in there and encourage them and say, these things are going to happen. What can we learn from it? A good teacher, a coach, will seek to influence you but never control you. The only ability I've got up here, the only position I hold in this caveat is a position of influence. I don't hold a position. I can't turn around and say, you've got to do this because my only position is a position of influence. And you can either take it or leave it. And in fact, your job after I'm finished is to go up and check up and make sure I'm telling the truth. My job is to come here and lay a trail of breadcrumbs. Your job after that is to go from the breadcrumbs and find the source. A moreh's job, a teacher's job, is to make him or herself progressively unnecessary. You don't see that very often, do you? That's the job of a teacher, is to make themselves redundant.
You know, Derek had to do that in South Africa towards the latter years. He had to find a person of ethnic origin, putting it politely. And he knew that. He had to do his work to get himself out of the job.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's our job. We're trainer wheels. We're not meant to stay on forever. When the child rides the bike for the first time without the trainer wheels, we've done our job. Some of you will become moreh teachers, instructors, coaches, mentors in the future as you use what you've already learned and experienced and added your own style in your own way. I have high expectations of you. And as we move forward in our shared vision and goals, I am accountable to Yahweh to focus far more on your learning than my teaching. The job of a teacher is not to focus on my teaching, but to focus on your learning. Even the hardest and most complicated facts, principles and tasks can be learned and achieved by breaking them into consistent bite-sized pieces and then reassembling them. And Yaakov, as a former teacher, has talked to me many times about the people that were written off, students that were written off by all the other teachers, and that were told that they were dumb, they'd never learn, they'd never be anything. Unfortunately for them, he didn't believe that. He actually turned around and knew that every child could be taught, every child can learn. It might be at a different pace, it might be in a different way, but everybody can learn. And what he did is, he actually got involved with them personally, and he found ways to motivate them and ways to teach them, and that's what a good teacher does. And Years later, he had someone coming up to me and saying thank you to him. That's the best reward a teacher can get. It's like, what they're saying was, you changed my life. Everybody else wrote me off. That you saw something in me that they didn't see. And that's what a teacher does. They see things in you that you can't see yourself. Pamela will confirm one of my favourite examples on how to eat an elephant.
One bite at a time.
It's all possible. You just got to break it down into bite-sized pieces. You just have to explain it. I'm sure I've said it before about my son. He just could not get, was it algebra or physics or something like that? It was just before the big exams.
Oh, yeah.
And he just didn't understand it.
Maths, just maths, yeah.
Yeah. And we had a friend across the road, and she was a young bank manager. And she said, oh, I'll send him across and have a crack at it. And he went from knowing absolutely nothing about it in 2 hours, 3 hours.
3 hours.
He passed the test the next day, and he passed it well. She filled in the little blanks that made the difference between him understanding and not understanding it. If somebody sat down and explained, because he came home and he said, I never realised how simple it was. They'd always made it so complicated. And she just broke it down and made it simple. And once he understood the process, he could figure out the questions. She didn't give him answers. She gave him a mechanism to produce his own answers. I mean, you've all heard about the one about feeding somebody. You can either give them a pack of fish, or